Hello, I'm Esther Gidoyuwat. It's Monday, March 14th. This is Africa 54.
Ukrainian and Russian delegations resume peace talks following a lethal cruise missile attack on a western Ukrainian military base. In Mozambique, the death toll from Cyclone Gombe rises to at least 12. And we'll have details on the Nigerian women who traffic other women and the activists trying to stop them.
Ukrainian and Russian officials have posed on Monday, just one day after Russia launched a lethal cruise missile attack on a western Ukraine military base, only 25 kilometers from Poland, a NATO member. At least 35 people died and more than 130 were wounded in the attack on the International Center for Peacekeeping and Security. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky says he had given a clear warning to Western leaders about the likelihood of an attack at the base where NATO units trained with Ukrainian troops. Many of the wounded were taken to a local hospital, where some of them were later transferred to bigger hospitals in the region. In an interview on American television's Fox News Sunday, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman said the United States is putting enormous pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire in its weeks-old invasion of Ukraine.
That pressure is beginning to have some effect. We are seeing some signs of a willingness to have real, serious negotiations. But I have to say, as your reporter said, so far, it appears that Vladimir Putin is intent on destroying Ukraine. We need to help Ukrainians in every way we can.
U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and officials from the National Security Council and State Department are meeting Monday in Rome with the director of China's Foreign Affairs Commission. Media reports have emerged that Moscow has requested military and economic assistance from China for Russia's war in Ukraine. The White House has warned China of severe consequences if it helps Russia avoid sanctions. In Kiev on Monday, Russian forces are continuing to pound Ukraine's capital city with airstrikes and heavy artillery fire. A residential building with ground floor commercial space was damaged in a blast that rocked the city of Kiev. A crater was seen on the ground in front of the building, and a wounded elderly man was walking outside assisted by local emergency services. A tram and other vehicles had been destroyed in the blast. Ukrainian officials say that frontline towns near Ukraine's capital region are being successfully evacuated for the 5th day in a row. Ukraine's state of emergency agency says an elderly woman was rescued Monday from a 9-story apartment building in Kiev that was hit by Russian artillery. The Ukrainian Interior Ministry advisor told Reuters that 2 people were killed and 3 others were hospitalized. Now, for the latest news and information about out of Western Ukraine, Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowther is standing by live in Lviv. Philip, what can you tell us about this operation in Mariupol? Has it been a success so far?
Well, there's a tiny sliver of good news coming out of Mariupol today. The first time in this 1.5-week siege of the city in the southeast of the country that we're hearing of a civilian convoy, in this case 160 cars, getting out of that city. Previously, there had been so many attempts for over a week now to establish a humanitarian corridor, which is what these civilian cars are on right now. But with that, ceasefires and the chance for safe safe passage for civilians to get out. All of these ceasefires were violated by Russia over the last week or so. It looks like today there might be a chance for some civilians to get out. How many people are on board those cars, we don't know at this point. Pretty much every single humanitarian convoy that was trying to make its way into Mariupol with food and medicine on board, for example, had been shot at and had to return, essentially. So finally, there might be something happening there. This, of course, while there are diplomatic talks to increase the number of local ceasefires and of humanitarian corridors. While that is happening, though, Mariupol is still being shelled, hit by Russian forces again and again. It's relentless. The siege is ongoing. And as you just mentioned, artillery strikes in Kiev on a residential building, airstrikes throughout the country. This is absolutely not coming to an end at this point.
Philip, there's a new round of talks that are happening right now. Is there any expectation of a resolution?
Well, a resolution in this case, the best case scenario is most likely what we just mentioned, some local ceasefires, the chance for humanitarian aid to get into some besieged cities, some of those suburbs of Kiev to the northwest where people need to get out so urgently. That is where local ceasefires are necessary. As for a general ceasefire, which would be probably one of the biggest goals of these diplomatic talks between Ukraine and Russia, it does not seem like a realistic prospect right now. The two sides spoke today via video. They said they're taking a technical pause. Whatever that means exactly, we don't know, and will continue the next day. This is the fourth round of talks that both sides are holding. In the past, they've always been in person on the border between Ukraine and Belarus, this time via video. Not at the very highest level of government, it must said. That is something that is still being attempted by some European leaders. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has said it too. He would like to meet his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, but all of those ideas for the highest level meeting possible between these two warring factions have been ignored so far by Vladimir Putin.
And very briefly, Philip, there was a military attack near Lviv. Has that changed the mood in that city?
Yeah, it has. It feels a little bit like innocence lost, if you will, for people here in Lviv, because this was considered a very safe place. Now a little bit less so because of that attack over the weekend on a military training facility not all too far from here, and as you mentioned earlier, not too far from the Polish border either. There have been attacks in 3 cities in the west of Ukraine over the last few days. This is still a city that is considered safe and such an important city for refugees trying to get out of Ukraine, for humanitarian aid that is supposed to make its way into Ukraine, and also for weapons shipments that are supposed to come from NATO member countries on the border with Ukraine and brought to the Ukrainian armed forces fighting the Russians inside Ukraine right now.
Philip, thanks. Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowther reporting live from Lviv, Ukraine. The Ukrainian government is continuing its call for a Western-backed no-fly zone and warplanes, but so far both requests are being denied. VOA's Arasha Basadi has more.
Wounded soldiers fighting in Ukraine arrive at a hospital Sunday following a Russian airstrike on the garrison city of Yavoriv. In the months before Russia invaded its neighbor, Yavoriv hosted joint military exercises between Ukrainian and NATO troops. Ukraine's request for a Western-backed no-fly zone and warplanes have been rejected. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky asserted that his forces so far killed 13,000 Russian troops, destroyed 1,000 Russian military vehicles, and dozens of jets and helicopters. VOA cannot independently verify those figures. Ukrainian officials say the worry now is a Russian introduction of chemical or biological weapons.
They bombed children's hospitals, so they can do everything. The whole world right now have to be engaged how to solve this problem.
As civilian casualties climb and millions of Ukrainians become refugees, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan addressed worries of Russian biochemical attacks.
It is a very legitimate concern, fear that Russia would use chemical weapons in Ukraine. They're right now accusing the United States and the Ukrainians of potentially using chemical or biological weapons, which is a tell. It's a tell that they themselves may be preparing to do so, and then trying to pin the blame on someone else. That's a classic page out of the Russian playbook.
The remaining residents of Kyiv awakened to the sounds of air raid sirens and gunfire as Russian forces appear to be moving to encircle the Ukrainian capital. Fighting in Ukraine rallies support around the military, many of whom were civilians just weeks ago. Ukraine's plight has drawn foreign backing, not just from donations, but from people traveling into a war zone to help.
And when I saw it, I honestly, I booked a flight from California and came here as fast as I could. If this isn't the fight of democracy and freedom against autocracy of our generation, I don't know what is.
The chief of police for the Kyiv region said his officers collected evidence of Russian troops killing civilians. The aim, he says, is presenting that evidence to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Russia denies it is targeting civilians. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
Now for more perspective on the war in Ukraine, joining me live via Skype from the VOA New York Bureau is VOA Russia's managing editor, Misha Gutkin. Misha, welcome to Africa 54. As Russia hits Ukraine with punishing airstrikes and refugees flee the country, the civilian death toll is continuing to rise. How are the Ukrainian citizens coping with this situation?
Well, it's a very difficult situation, as reporters on the ground suggest. And in fact, just a few minutes ago, Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, spoke to reporters here in New York. And he said that the toll of civilians, women and children is growing larger by the day. Officially, by the UN numbers, some almost 700 civilians were killed in this action. But unofficially, the numbers are much, much higher. They're probably a number in the thousands.
Misha, the Russian critic, jailed Russian critic Alexei Navalny has called on Russians to protest against this war, and he wanted those rallies held everywhere in the country, most cities. How have Russians responded to his call?
There have been some anti-war protests in various cities, including Moscow and St. Petersburg, two of the largest cities in Russia. But it must be mentioned that since this war started, the Russian parliament adopted a series of very harsh laws that subject to those who take part in protests to very harsh punishment, fines, and jail time. So since this war started, there was over 14,000 people in a number of cities arrested for participating in anti-war demonstrations. Just over the weekend, some 700 people were arrested in St. Petersburg, Moscow, and other cities. But again, those people who do take it to the streets, they know full well the risks that they're taking, and those are brave people.
And Misha, very briefly, how are you as VOA Russian service covering this Russian invasion of Ukraine?
With great difficulty, Esther. VOA had to cease operations in Russia, and not only Voice of America, but also other Western news agencies had to withdraw their reporters and cease operations. And that's, again, because of the harsh law that was passed by the Russian parliament. The law obliges all the media to use official terminology and only data from the Russian government and from the Russian Defense Ministry. Now, in Russia, what's going on in Ukraine, they call a special military operation. So if any journalist calls what's going on a war or an invasion, that's a violation of the law and can be subject to harsh punishment up to 15 years in jail. So it's very difficult to cover events inside Russia. We're trying our best.
Misha, thank you so much. That was VOA Russia managing editor Misha Gutkin reporting live via Skype from New York. Zambians are observing a 7-day mourning period for former President Rupiah Banda, 85, who died Friday. According to the state broadcaster ZNBC, Banda, who is being accorded a state funeral, will be buried Friday at the presidential burial site. Banda, Zambia's fourth president, who was in power from 2008 to 2011, was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago and had been receiving medical treatment. Banda also served as acting president in mid-2008 when then-President Levi Mwanawasa suffered a stroke. Banda's tenure was marred by allegations of graft, and in 2013, Zambia's parliament stripped him of immunity from prosecution. Banda stood accused of abuse of office, corruption, acquisition of public property, and misappropriation of public funds, but was never convicted in a court of law and did not serve any jail time. At least 53 people are dead in western Ethiopia after an unidentified armed group attacked a civilian convoy and its military escort in a region plagued by ethnic violence, according to a rights body appointed by the government. The Ethiopian Human Rights Commission says the previously unreported attack occurred on March 2nd in Metakel. 20 soldiers and 3 civilians were killed in the ambush, while 30 attackers died during the day-long gun battle that followed. 11 more people were killed in the following day, including one who was burned alive, as security forces rounded up suspects and carried out summary killings, according to the rights group. The death toll from Cyclone Gombe that struck Mozambique has risen to at least 12 people after devastating wind and rain lashed the southern African country. Cyclone Gombe has affected more than 30,000 people, injuring 40, destroying more than 3,000 homes since making landfall Friday. 170 kilometers per hour of torrential rainfall hit northern Nampula province by the Indian Ocean, and neighboring Zambezia province particularly hard. In the port city of Nacala, houses were teetering on the edge of cliffs facing the ocean and walls had collapsed. 8 shelters are now open in Nampula, Mozambique's most populous province. Officials say a train accident in southeastern Democratic Republic of Congo has left at least 75 people dead. Experts are now looking at the causes of the crash, which happened Thursday night when a freight service train derailed. Of the 125 people injured, 28 are in critical condition, according to the Communications Ministry. Investigators are looking at the condition of the truck, and the province's interior minister says the accident appeared to have been caused by a sudden loss of traction. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Still to come, Nigerian women comprise one of the largest groups of international sex trafficking victims. We'll have a report. Stay with us.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Mudu, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Season 2 of the Basketball Africa League is here. After a historic inaugural season, 12 national champions from across the continent are ready to compete for the 2022 BAL Championship. From March 5th to March 28th, tune in and follow the BAL on Voice of America. 54 countries, 12 teams, 1 continent, but only 1 champion. Game on!
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta is endorsing his former political rival Raila Odinga for the nation's presidency after their parties joined forces several weeks ago. Presidential and parliamentary elections are expected to be held in August. The two men have a long history of running against each other in elections. In 2018, Kenyatta and Odinga baffled political observers in the country when they declared a truce after 2017 post-election violence that killed dozens of people. Nigerian women make up one of the largest groups of international sex trafficking victims, according to UN agencies. But women are also among the perpetrators of this crime. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja on the women who exploit other women and the activists trying to stop them.
In 2014, Latifah Ayodele was invited by a female relative to travel to Malaysia to further her studies. But the life-changing opportunities she imagined nearly destroyed her. We are not using her real name to protect her identity. When Ayodele arrived in Libya after an arduous journey, she was taken by a madam and forced into prostitution.
They're called healers. It's those healers that they now arrange us inside at the back, 24 people sat at the back, and the inside 8 people. We just fold ourselves inside like that. The woman took another healer so that we cannot ask her any question again.
Ayodele never got to Malaysia but remained in Libya working as a sex slave for 4 years until she was able to escape. Nigeria's National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, says nearly half the suspects arrested for human trafficking in 2019 were women, usually older women known as madams, who lure and traffic other women. Josiah Emerule heads NAPTIP's intelligence arm.
Everybody is actually involved, both men and women. But when you look at the international dimension, which has to do mostly with sexual exploitation, you discover that it is mostly the madams, the women, who are the main perpetrators, but they also use people of other sex, which is the men, to even take all these people away.
Esther Okafor, also not her real name, was trafficked to Libya. After nearly 2 years as a sex slave, she managed to escape to a Catholic church where she was rescued by the International Organization for Migration and repatriated to Nigeria. But she was already 5 months pregnant.
In Libya, abortion is like a crime. You go to prison for it. So, and besides, I didn't have the money, even though it could happen. I didn't have the money. I was not financially capable to have an abortion. So, and sometimes when I look at her, I cry.
NAPTIP says it is difficult to determine the exact number of sex trafficking cases in Nigeria because so many go unreported. But a non-profit group started by a former NAPTIP director enables victims to report issues of trafficking and other forms of gender-based violence.
We refer cases like that to NAPTIP, for criminal litigation cases where it is possible to get their traffickers, but sometimes the victims do not even know who their traffickers are. They can't give you any information. And so we just give them psychosocial support and empower them.
Experts say victims like Ayodele and Okafor will suffer psychological scars from their ordeals for the rest of their lives. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Hosts Duke registered their first win in 3 games after beating REG of Rwanda 92-86 in the Sahara Conference of the Basketball African League in Dakar on Friday. Also, BAL Season 2 opening game champion Seydou Legacy Athletic of Guinea defeated Club Ferroviario da Beira of Mozambique 90-74 on Saturday. Let's look at the weekend action.
Facing elimination after losing their first 2 games, Duke thwarted a frantic effort by Reg in the 4th quarter to pull out a win. Tariq Ali pulled a jump shot early to keep Duke within range.
That's a really good score, that is.
Shobozwa kept the score tight with a long shot after a pass from Fila.
Shobozwa! There it is, that's the position.
Thomas Jr. of Reg added another 3 off a pass from Fila to stay within 2 points towards the end of the 2nd quarter.
Coming in from Cleveland, Thomas Jr.
Nice passing from Sankon to Faye ended with a layup by Diakite. Gomez gave Duke another basketball before Tariq Ali's long-range 3 put Duke ahead early in the 4th quarter.
Oh, that's a beautiful shot. Look at that. Ali's back in business.
Diallo hit another 3 to give Duke a 4-point lead halfway in the 4th quarter. Reg answered with a layup by Fila.
Oh, that's lovely.
But a fast break pass from Ali to Diop ended with a dunk that probably sealed the deal for Duke's first win, giving the Senegalese team a fighting chance to go to the playoffs.
Celebrate their first win.
Biera's Perry makes a pass to Wansu, who hits a 3 early in the 1st quarter.
Oh.
But Guinea answers back with a 3 of their own as Crawford finds Opekpa, who scores.
So Opekpa, well, make a statement early on in the game, why not?
Crawford gets the ball once again to Opekpa, who assists Nzianku with 2 points.
Connection between Opekpa and Nzianku.
Guinea keeps up the lead in the 2nd quarter as Nzianku passes to Crawford, who hits a long 3.
Whatever you can do, I can do.
Slaxenbayer gets the ball to Crawford, who makes another 3 soon after, pushing their lead to 10.
Long range again. Look at that sensational stuff.
Biera's Kennedy tries a long-range 3-pointer and misses, but Chimvelu takes the opportunity to dunk 2 points.
That is the way to do it. Absolutely sterling stuff there.
With 1 minute left in the 3rd and down by 16, Kennedy finds Nurmamade for 3.
Get those points in, and they do.
Perry gets the ball to Kennedy, who finds Nurmamade, who makes another 3.
Once again, he's on fire, this Nurmamade, doing some great work down the right side.
But Guinea's Crawford hits a 3 in the 4th to extend the lead to 12. Club Ferroviario de Beira of Mozambique just couldn't catch up, and Seydou Legacy Athletic Club Slack of Guinea finished the game with their 2nd win of the season.
That report was filed by our VOA Jackson Bungani. Thank you for watching. That's our show for today from all of us here in Washington. Thanks for watching.